Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Spunkify here yet again for MMOBomb.com, and welcome back to the Free to Play Podcast, episode 105. Today is May 5th, 2014, already in the month of May. So incredible. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older. I think it is, but man, oh man, these months seem to pass by so much quicker nowadays. Jason, how are you doing?
Oh, wait until you get to be my age, because as far as I'm concerned, it's already October.
Oh, really? So you're like already in October over there. Like, once I get to your age, like the months don't even like jive with the rest of the calendar year.
I think it's Einsteinian time dilation. How if something is older, time passes more quickly. I think it's related to that.
Yeah, except for you, you're like in totally separate, like, I don't know, seasons. You're like
it's actually 2019 for me.
2019. It's fall over there. You're celebrating Christmas, what have you. Well, Jason, I'm glad that you've sort of like astral projected back to this time period and you're with us here because we've got a great show for you, and you're gonna have to really concentrate really hard to keep your physical form, Jason, because you're gonna have to buckle in.
But I have to stop playing Project Titan for a little while and go ahead and do this. All right.
Project Titan.
You know, the Blizzard game.
Oh man, Project Titan. I thought that got scrapped. I thought they were moving on to something else. I thought that wasn't even like in existence anymore. But that's like, I could dedicate a whole show just about like the existence of Project Titan or not.
There are websites all about it with all the information, every little nugget that comes out that has everything about it.
I think it's more like the Sasquatch now. Like, you know, it's just like it's mythical. You know, there's like blurry images of it here or there. You're like, that's not Project Titan.
It's like
some guys like, yeah, it is. I swear it's not just, you know, it's something in MS Paint.
Probably.
Something like that. Well, Jason, we've got a super great show. Glad to have you on board, as always, on this one. But why don't we just jump right into the news and get right into the deep of it. Now, we've got, first of all, some pretty exciting news. If you're an FPS fan, generally, if you're just looking for something to break up the monotony of Planetside 2's PvP, you'll be happy to know that Defiance is going completely free to play. Defiance is, of course, the MMO FPS from Tryon. It's kind of like Tryon's MMO that they don't really like to talk about too much. They love to talk about Rift. Defiance, not so much.
They like talking about Trove a fair amount too.
Yeah, I think,
and of course,
sure.
Archage more recently.
Of course, but Defiance just kind of like fell off the map. They had their first season of the show that was tied into sci-fi, and the game came out and it had like some decent buzz around it, and then it just kind of, like, after the first month, no one ever talked about it again. It never had any sort of like significant, you know, milestones, if you will. It seemed. I don't know. Did you actually ever get to play around with Defiance any?
I played it in the beta some, and I kind of liked it. And again, we talk about it going free to play, and it was actually like $5 on Steam over one of the holiday sales. And I thought about getting back into it, but I just had other stuff I was doing. Didn't know anybody who was playing, so it was always something that looked kind of good to me, but I just never got into it because I just never had, I thought, the strong enough reason, I guess.
Yeah, I always labeled it as like I'd play it if it were free kind of MMO.
But that's why I talk about it being $5 over Steam. It was like, if I couldn't even, and granted, yeah, that's not that much different from free, but if I couldn't even get into it for $5, I'm just wondering how much I'll look into it now.
And I wonder if that like sort of gives a sign of the current state of MMOs. I mean, where it could be an MMO FPS like Defiance, right? It could be something like Defiance where 20 years ago we would have killed for an MMO FPS. And for $5, for something that obviously cost a team millions to make, for $5 we can't really even justify paying $5 for it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to Defiance, you know, the MMO, it's got the gameplay a little bit similar, you know, of course, to Borderlands. That's been a huge sort of comparison that's been made a lot. That it's similar to Borderlands. It's got sort of that open world, mission-y type feel to it. But a lot of players just kind of mentioned that they just kind of lost steam as they played over time. I was looking over the weekend, I was looking at sort of different people's reactions to Defiance going free to play. And there is, of course, some people who were upset because they purchased it, you know, the sort of early adopters. And then there was other people who were kind of like, yeah, they expected it. You know, it kind of wasn't really anything spectacular. And I'd have to sort of agree with them in that Defiance is an MMO where, okay, it may have like a core experience that is passable, but I don't know if really it was something that was like spectacular. So it going free to play though, may actually be super beneficial because there's so much saturation, Jason, that it's good at what it does, but it's not, I guess, notable, spectacular, if you will. Attention grabbing.
It sounds like you could be describing the show. Did you watch the show at all?
Oh my gosh, I watched one episode of the show.
The first episode I admit was horrible. The first episode was just terrible. After that, it got to the point of being passable but not spectacular. I toughed it out through the whole first season. I was like, all right, this is okay, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it again. But yeah, it's the same thing. That both it and the game got a fair amount of hype, and it was all like, hey, we're tying this together. It's going to be awesome that they're together. At least watching the show and not playing the game, I couldn't see any resemblance between the show and the game. Now in the game, I know that some characters crossed over. There's a character on the show who's in the first 2 or 3 episodes, and then Vanisher came back on the 8th episode. Supposedly she was in the game at that point or something, so that was her tie into that. But yeah, it was that whole thing. They based so much on that, I think, on the whole tie-in aspect. And again, I don't know how much that was in the game, but it just didn't seem like that was enough to sell it.
I kind of feel like they were developed independently, and then they just went back and they're like, okay, where can we tie these in together? Where can we actually rope these in? Because I always wondered about that too. How much could they actually tie it into the show?
I think
you're making a sci-fi show, which obviously means there has to be some CGI added in. You can't make huge, sweeping changes in the game world and have that reflect the show, and vice versa. You could be a little bit more flexible, I think, with the MMO. But yeah, I noticed that too because I was interested to see if there was a lot of tie-in, if anything had really happened over the course of the first season. And the short story of that was no, it really didn't have that much of a huge impact, at least in the initial season. That could change. Season 2 is set to begin right after the game goes free to play, which is in June. It's set to go free to play June 4th, with the console versions going shortly after in mid-July. So there is a chance that Season 2 could be different. It starts on June 19th. But it doesn't really give me hope for anything new or groundbreaking. That being said, I'm still going to play it. I'm still going to give it a chance because I'm always down for a new MMO FPS. There's not enough of those, Jason. Even if there is just a few mediocre offerings of what there is, there's not enough.
Yeah, definitely more of the, like you say, MMO kind of stuff where it's open world or leveling or whatever. Because I'm just not a big fan of just arena or team-based shooters as much. As I'd rather have something with a little more exploration, a little more story or whatever, like an MMO, but with gunplay.
Now, I did hear, I was reading, and I don't know how much of a basis this is for a complaint, but I was reading that some players weren't happy with the development of Defiance recently, some of the choices that the team has made. In changing how Defiance is developed. And one of the main things that I saw had to do with how their weapons are sort of made or distributed, the progression of the weapons, essentially. As far as I can see, when you first played Defiance, when you got a weapon, you could foreseeably use that weapon for a long time. It wasn't necessarily a linear progression where, okay, you go to a next zone and you have a more powerful weapon and so on. You could get a weapon and it'd sort of be like Borderlands where you'll have that weapon for a while. It's very good, and it has a lot of interesting stats to it. Even if you go into a new zone, you get more ego, which is, I believe, the way that you progress in Defiance. You could still use a weapon that you got earlier because it was just that good. Changes now have been made where it's much more like impactful progression. You can see where your progression is heading. You can kind of get those new tier rewards in terms of new weapons, and actually see that this one is better than the previous tier, better than the previous zone's weapons, etc. And that has some people upset because they liked it how it was more freeform original. But as someone who hasn't played a lot of Defiance, I'm kind of curious to know how much of that will be an issue to players coming in. And that's sort of who Triand is going for. Obviously, we're going for free players. We're going for new players. Is that going to be an experience that is negatively impactful towards those players? And I can't see it being out the gate impactful for new players.
Well, I mean, it depends on. I mean, first of all, there's not open world PvP, so it's not like you have that kind of issue. Like you're going to get headshotted by some other guy. So
for sure.
Worse is you're just going to do less DPS or whatever than him. I mean, it sounds like they tried to do a kind of, like I said, like a horizontal leveling aspect where you don't really, like I say, you don't improve your weapons, the numbers on them so much. And while I like that, I think it sounds attractive, but I will admit that I don't know how long-term viable that is in a game. Because, that's how it is in an MMO. If you don't ever improve your stats, how do you ever have greater things to fight or whatever? Otherwise, it just turns into like a farming game where you're fighting the same low-level mobs over and over. I want to say there's a way to do that, to make it so that you actually have a game that can do that and be attractive without necessarily like I said, just the straight-up farming. I don't know that anyone's really managed to pull it off yet.
I do know that a lot of sort of the events and such that are meant for higher level, I do believe players, lower level players, do get boosted now to those higher things as well. So even if you are a low level player, you don't have as good of a gear, you will be able to contribute somewhat to some of the open world events and not feel like everybody else is just leagues ahead of you in this progression system. And that sort of brings me to my next point, which was Trion's been on this kick about no tricks, no traps. That's their sort of mantra. That it goes by in Rift, it goes by in Archage, and it goes by in Trove. That we're not going to hide anything. You're going to get all the content for free up front, in personal. And the same goes for Defiance, of course. They're going to have the same thing. But they are going to give those who purchase the game, which makes sense, a couple of extra, benefits. And those are like character slots, loadouts, art key code capacity, inventory slots, and then a one-time allotment of 1,000 Arcforge, which I had to look that up. I didn't know what Arcforge was, being that I'm not a Defiance player. But it does appear to be quite necessary. It helps for the upgrading of your weapon's power rating, or even bumping an uncommon weapon's rarity up to, say, epic. So it's pretty important, it seems, and it doesn't seem like it's very easy to get. There's an article that I found which linked to a thread on the Defiance forums, which talked about how difficult it was for lower level players to get very much Arcforge for a long time. So it could arguably be seen as, this may be too much of a gap. There may be creating too much of an artificial gap by giving everybody that bought the game 1,000 Arcforge that they can use to, do all these different really important things in the game. And, you could argue that, there's this huge discrepancy between new players and those, they're not going to be in the same tier, etc. There's obviously going to be playing with other new players, etc. But if you're going to have that sort of cross combination, people playing in the same zone, fighting the same things, you're going to want the gap to not be so large. I would think. I don't know. What do you think, Jason? The rewards they're giving out is just too excessive overall. Just like they're packing on too many rewards for a paying player.
So here, the first thing that I thought when I heard about Defiance going free to play was, whenever I've heard of any MMO going free to play, any normal sub MMO, I've always thought, okay, yeah,
this is buy to play. This wasn't sub.
I know. But what I'm saying is, whenever a sub game goes free to play, yeah, the people who are subscribing are going to complain about it. They're griping, all the new people, they're going to nickel and dime us to death. But first of all, most of those games will have a sub option, where you get VIP or premium or whatever, so you can essentially play like you used to. Or you can probably, figure a way to cobble together enough microtransaction stuff. You only pay like 10 to 15 a month, so you can get basically that same deal that you had before. This is a buy-to-play game. If I bought this before, I didn't have any sub. I expected I would get the whole game with just my box purchase, and I have no more that I have to pay. Whereas now you realize, as a free-to-play, they have to put in microtransactions to get you to pay. So this is a rare case where it actually seems like if you were a paid player before, it's very easy to see you might be getting a worse deal. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to have to it seems like you're almost going to have to shell out some microtransactions. So I can get them trying to appease those people a lot more, as opposed to if it was like a sub game.
That's interesting to put it that perspective. They've actually had microtransactions in the game for a little bit now.
But I assume, again, I shouldn't assume, but I mean, usually in a game I'm using Guild Wars 2 as an example, because that's the same thing, buy to play. Mm-hmm. I've spent $20 on Guild Wars 2 since it started. I've never really felt the need to buy stuff. Anything that I want to buy is pretty much all cosmetics or XP boost, a little bit of stuff like that. But if Guild Wars 2 suddenly decided they were going to go completely free to play, I'd have to expect that they'll be putting in more aggressive cash shop stuff to try and generate more revenue, and I might feel a little bit squeezed by that.
They do mention that anybody who's purchased a game before it goes free to play gets 30 days of Paradise Patron status, which gives them a pretty wide boost to several different things, including skill XP, salvaging, reputation gains, and these all stack with the boosts. They specifically mentioned that these all stack with the boosts that are available in the store. And then they go on to say that you're also going to get 10% off the store-wide discount on boosts, cost, and block boxes. So it's kind of like, oh, hey, you know, the cash shop is going to be more important now. You're going to get stuff in the cash shop for a little cheaper for a little bit.
Just so you know, Defiance is only $10 on Steam right now. So
you could get all these benefits just by buying it for $10 before it goes free. And, you know, that was sort of the thing. I noticed that people were sort of debating whether or not they should buy it, you know, and I kind of think as though that maybe what Triumph was going for is just making it so incentivizing to buy it for so cheap that, you know, Triumph can get a couple of extra box purchases out the door before it goes completely free to play.
It's almost like a form of early access, which we'll talk about later.
Right? It's kind of like it went back into early access for free to play players by just being able to pay for it. And it's kind of a weird mentality to have because that's, you know, it's clearly not what they're doing. Like, on paper, it's not what they're doing. But psychologically, it could be considered what they're doing just because of how much they're offering those who have purchased the game. And chances are, if you're purchasing it and you're still playing, that's going to be great. But it's also viewed as a way to re-incentivize players who maybe have left the game to come back to the game because they're like, oh, man, look at all this extra stuff that I'm going to have for at least 30 days. On top of the stuff that I'll have, you know, just permanently now as a new buy-to-play player converting over to free-to-play. I have to say, on paper, it already looks better than the SOTOR free-to-play conversion. Having bought a box set of that, having bought a box version of SOTOR, I am not happy with what I get for that. So this does look a lot better in that regard for those who purchased it.
Yeah, that's not difficult.
I've had good success. I've had good and bad success with having games that weren't free to play go free to play. Like I also purchased the Batman shooter. I can't think of it. Gotham: A City of Imposters. That was another example of a good game that was buy to play that went free to play. It gave you a lot of boosts and stuff like that, but nothing that completely made you more powerful than anybody else around you. You know, didn't give you access to certain weapons that were exclusive to just you or stuff like that. So hopefully it's the same deal with Defiance, and we can see that happen. Well, moving on here, why don't we go ahead and move on to our next sort of topic that we're going to be discussing today, which was CCP. Of course, the developers of EVE Online. They are developing a new FPS for the PC, Jason, and it is not, in quotation marks, Dust 514. It's not. It's the Frankenstein birthchild of Dust 514. They said it themselves in so many words.
Well, that was the question that one interviewer asked him right off. Is this Dust 514 on PC?
Like, is it?
No. The guy says right away, no.
No. CCP adamantly says Project Legion, which is their new PC exclusive FPS, is not Dust 514 on PC, but it is Dust 514 in certain aspects. They go ahead. They say in one breath that it's not Dust 514, but they do say in the other breath that, oh, of course it's Dust 514 because it uses some of the best parts of Dust 514. It is a shooter after all. That's sort of I like their argument. They're on the one hand they're like no, on the other hand they're like yes. But yes, Project Legion is supposed to be a grander scale, I guess. If you wanna just give it some sort of labor. It's a more grand scale version of Dust in the sense that it's not just mercenaries fighting each other in these instance-based areas on the PlayStation 3. It's to incorporate a much more open world sandbox style environment where players can engage in both PvP and PvE. So it's both of those, and it functions more along the lines of EVE Online, where you have players going out and just doing these PvE cooperative sandbox areas with other social players, killing these drones and getting gear from these drones, and then selling that gear in an economy to those low sec or null sec players, the PvP players, so that they can then use that gear out in the battlefield. So the details are really scarce right now, Jason. They haven't really talked too much about how open world it will be, and how do you actually interact with these systems. But I wanted to get your initial impression, just overall, of how you think CCP is approaching this new Project Legion. As it stands, Project Legion isn't officially in production. It's still a prototype. But I just wonder, Jason, do you think that this is something that could catch on PC, or do you think there's just too many FPSs already out there that it could be drowned in that sort of ruckus?
I think this is what Dust 514 should have been, in terms of being on the right platform, being the right kind of game, kind of open world sandboxy, and just I think it has a much higher ceiling and a much higher potential than Dust really ever did. Obviously, Dust, one of the big reasons they wanted it on PlayStation 3 was because they wanted to have what the one guy said. There are tens of millions of people on PlayStation 3, and we want to get them playing Dust. And obviously, they didn't quite manage that many people. And like someone like said at the end of that interview, it was, what did he say? Came out at the wrong platform at the wrong time of its life cycle. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that it's going to be coming out on PC, which is where all your EVE players are already, as well as a lot of other people who, like me, who are MMO players and are into games, not necessarily EVE, but similar games, like you mentioned Planetside 2 or Borderlands or whatever. I guess Borderlands is on consoles too, but yeah, I mean, I think this looks a lot better and sounds a lot better than Dust ever did, at least in my mind.
I think the one thing you got to also remember is CCP is a very iterative company. Dust, when it came out, was pretty bad, and then they've made a lot of changes to it now, where if you're looking at it from the perspective of a free-to-play shooter on the PS3, not just a free-to-play shooter, but a free-to-play shooter on the PS3, what it is now is not bad. It is actually a pretty, a pretty cognitive and cohesive experience, which was a far cry from what it was when it first was released. So definitely they've made improvements there, and I think they know going into Project Legion what worked for Dust and what didn't work for Dust, and how they can sort of tie that in. That being said, I kind of wonder what that spells for Dust. Like, they kind of don't want to talk about it, honestly. There's been questions to them, and they say that Dust will continue, Dust will still going, and then they say, well, is Dust going to be relevant by the time Project Legion comes out? And that's where they're not really so keen on talking about that factor.
All right, I'm going to tell my little story now. I've actually been hoping you would ask about this, because I had this thing all made up. About a week ago, not this weekend, but the weekend before, I wanted to go to a restaurant that I hadn't been to for like a year. So I drive by it, and it's just not there. Like, there is a pile of rubble where it used to be. So I go home, and I just look online a little bit. I like type in the name of the restaurant in Dallas and whatever, just see if I can find out about it. And I find a press release from like December about the company that owns that chain of restaurants, and it says that it like declared bankruptcy or had some other financial issues. But in a statement from them, they said that everything was fine. Everything would proceed as usual.
But there's just like some burning heap of rubble where it used to be.
Well, it wasn't burning. It had been demolished. There was still some construction vehicles there. But yeah, in December, everything's fine. Business will continue as usual. In March, the restaurant is gone. So I'm not saying that's how it's going to happen with Dust necessarily, but I don't take any company saying everything's going to be fine, we're going to continue as normal. I never accept that.
Well, I mean, I think you can realize is that Dust was always touted as a PS3 exclusive, and it was never not going to be a PS3 exclusive. Sure. So how do you get around that fact? How do you make a new Dust without making Dust? And Project Legion, honestly, just seems like the best bet for them. And while we give them a hard time for, quote-unquote, ditching Dust for Project Legion, even though we don't know if Project Legion is going to be a full game or not, it's still kind of in that limbo state that Valkyrie was, Eve Valkyrie, until they went ahead and said, okay, we're going to make this into a full game. But it looks like they would do that with Project Legion. It's certainly heading that direction. I can't blame them for wanting to do that, though. I can't blame them for wanting to expand upon it more and use all the computer resources that they have available to them, which is a lot more than a typical PS3. Given that the PS3 is a lot older. So it seems like a good step to do that on. Overall, would you actually play? I mean, Jason, did you ever have any interest in EVE Online, like the universe itself?
Slightly. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. It's all probably a little too cutthroat for me. And again, just the learning curve getting in and being behind. Some people taking 7 years or what I think is what it takes to get all your skills or something like that. That part of it never appealed to me. I would hope that this is a little more. We always talk about a little more Planetside 2-ish in terms of progression. A little easier, a little more friendly to noobs. I think they know that. They know that they can't just make something that only people who've been playing, 18 hours a day for a year can get into. They know that a year after this launches, they still have to attract new people. It's not 2003 anymore, and they think they can get away with that. So they're gonna do something a little more friendly than that, and I like that. I like that it's gonna be like that, and it looks like something I could really get into more so than even if I'd owned a PS3. Just like I talked about, I'd rather have something more open world than just arena based.
Sure.
And
one thing I will say is that they actually quoted Planetside as being too rigid due to its rinse and repeat capture points, where you capture them, you defend them, you capture them. Well, and they said that they wanted to be more dynamic with Project Legion.
Yeah, Planetside 2 does get a little repetitive in that it's just go to a base, destroy it, and go on to the next one. Whereas they talk about a lot of different things you can do in Project Legion, and that does sound pretty attractive.
Yeah, I like the fact that they specifically said, this style of base capturing, this isn't really dynamic gameplay. This is sort of just ebb and flow. So I like the fact that they mentioned that they wanted to create these different environments for players to progress and have these objectives that aren't just tied to specific points. I think that's a big thing that shooters have been doing for a long time that could use some innovation. So hopefully that CCP can capture that. There is a little bit of gameplay footage out there, not too much, and honestly what it looks like is kind of looks like they just stripped out the FPS mechanics out of Dust and put them in a slightly different environment. Sure. So I wouldn't read too much into that. That's probably going to change quite a bit before it's even, if it ever is even released. That being said, I wonder if there'll be some founder packs for them, Jason.
Well, that's what they should have done with Dust. They should have just said it was early access.
They should have said it's early. The PS3 version of Dust is early access for the PC version of Project Legion.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's not what I had in mind, but yeah, that could work too.
We just had to test it with the PS3 controller just to make sure that we absolutely didn't want to do anything with the PS3 controller ever again. So Founders Packs. We're talking a little bit about Founders Packs. Mentioned Dust. Actually, Dust had Founders Packs initially before it was released. But I was talking to you, Jason, a little bit about these. It just kind of seems like this is the new. This is what everybody does now. Is everybody makes a Founders Pack? They don't make beta. There's no beta buy-ins anymore. It's just founder pack buy-ins now.
It didn't even used to have beta buy-ins. It used to just be you sign up on the website to try to get into beta.
Yeah, it used to be you would pay. They would pay you.
Yeah, to test the game. Well, not necessarily. It's just you would get in for free basically if your name came up in the.
Well, early betas, early betas.
Sure.
There was talk. I actually never saw being paid for playing in a beta, but I remember there was talk of being paid for playing beta games and MMOs and testing them out and what have you. That was around like the SWG time.
Sure.
Star Wars Galaxy. But with founder packs, these have become a staple pretty much with every game across all the genres. Primarily genres of games that are RPG-like in nature or progressive in nature. And we were talking about this, Jason, because they've been around for a little bit now. And we have two examples that came out within the last week or so. We have the Archage Founders Packs, which the game is currently in alpha, and those Founder Packs, they go all the way up to $149.99, which is the maximum tier of their Founders Packs available currently right now. It is called the Archium tier, and it gains access to alpha and beta, lots of credits, it says, some head start, patron head starts, and some armor, a glider, and other, nice Founders Cloak items, other cosmetic items, what you would expect. And the tier starts out at silver at $49.99. And this is for a game that's currently in alpha. On the flip side of this, we have Transformers Universe. They have their own Founders Packs, of course, ranging from $44.99 to $449.99. This is a game that is not in alpha, or at least visible alpha. There's no real long gameplay sessions, visible online. There's no real, gameplay video. It's not very transparent in its development. There's a little bit of information out there from some interviews, some early write-ups, but not in the same level as, say, Archage in terms of actual content available. And they aren't actually even offering access to a beta or alpha. So you've got these two very contrasting Founders Packs. And the question that I have for you, Jason, is that are any of them something that we should just be complacent with and okay with? Or are any of these things that as consumers, not just as gamers, but as consumers, that we should feel as tolerable? Should we ever feel like we should be able to pay $150 to gain access to an alpha or a game or a beta? Does that actually worth it to support? Are we supporting those games at that point, or are we just feeding some kind of primal urge to have things now?
Yeah, probably more of the second. I mean, I'll tell you, the first time I did this, the only time probably that I bought a game early, I guess maybe twice I've done it, was with Minecraft. Remember back how that seemed almost like the first one to do this. The first time I ever heard of buying a game in alpha to know that I would get the full version later on. And that was like $10. And I thought at the time, okay, that's not bad. I buy it for $10 now. It's going to be a full game, like a typical game you buy is going to be $50 or something. Maybe it's only $30, $40, I don't know. That seemed okay to me, buying a game ahead of time. And even if I never played it, even if I never touched it until it fully launched and was bug-free out of alpha, whatever, I still got it for $10 instead of the $40, $50, whatever. So I can see that. And the other game that I say I bought, that I pre-bought like that, would be Guild Wars 2. Which I bought when they first offered it. Again, I paid $80, got the digital deluxe, and that counted the full version that would come later, which again was going to cost me anyway, so fine, whatever. For free-to-play games, it's just weirder because this is nothing but impatience. to put it no other way. The other stuff, okay, fine. That's like I said, I could buy it. Figure I'm just buying it at a discount and then just sit on it for months or whatever, and then play it whenever it comes out for real. This is like you could have it for free if you just wait, a few months. But because you got to have it now, you're going to spend the $50 or $100 or $450 because it's just have to have it now kind of.
And that's the thing. The $450 pack, I could find no information that said that it guaranteed you access to a beta or alpha. There was no definitive sort of, usually they have a label and says has alpha access or has beta access. None of those on the Transformers.
Here's one thing. Here's one little thing I want to mention that I saw in the comments of someone talking about this in an article somewhere. This guy who said he was like a Transformers collector and he'd been doing stuff for like 10, 15 years. He said that statue is going to be worth real money later on down the road. So it might almost be like a good deal to buy that big pack. I don't know. This is what this guy said. I could actually believe it.
Some guy on the internet said it's a good idea to buy a $450 Transformers Universe pack. That guy is the best marketer ever.
Out of curiosity, I looked up the Darth Malgus statue from the SWTOR collector's edition. It was worth, on eBay, it was like $20. So, I don't know.
Clearly.
Clearly
the thing is appreciating in value. Yeah, so in terms, the bronze pack, you get $30 worth of relics, 60 days of combo season pass, and that's it. Other than having a bronze founder avatar and immortalized.
$30 worth of relics. So you're getting, I guess, $30 worth of cash shop stuff already.
And that's all relative as it is, because they could make something cost $15 worth of relics. And
well, but it's going to be whatever's in the cash shop. To me, it's like, if it's $45 basically for the pack and $30 worth of relics. So you're basically paying $15 for the other stuff. $15 plus $30 worth of cash shop stuff. So that's, I guess, sort of okay.
You get a way better deal if you go up to the silver, because the silver is $59.99 and you get $50 worth of relics. So that means you're only paying $9.99 for everything else.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing. Like, these packs, you're like, oh man, I get such a good deal, but not really, because do you know what an MK2 mining probe is, or a base power core?
Like
they haven't explained what these things are yet.
That's the thing, is we know a fair amount of what goes into like Archade. Usually by the time a game has this kind of stuff offered, you have a pretty good idea what the stuff is. But
yeah, people know what a glider is in Archade. They know what plate mail is. They know what a cloak is. They know a 4-day head start. I personally am not a huge fan of Founders Packs just because I'm not a fan of funding a game before it's actually out and it's sort of hit all of its marks. I do it occasionally if it's like an indie game and I feel like they could use it for the development. But for larger, MMOs or larger games, it's the jaded part of me, honestly, Jason. Just doesn't allow me to do that kind of stuff. But I could at least understand it with Archage because I can see what you get. You get things that visibly, sort of, again, strike that impatience. It covers the impatience, allows you to play earlier, allows you to get more things earlier, etc. But with Transformers Universe, they're removing the thing that even started this in the first place, which was giving people access early.
Right.
And it just becomes you buying a $450 pack of a game that's going to be free to play in probably 6 months.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
like I said, at least in Archage it says too. You can find it's like you get credits, which
exactly.
Are going to be a value. So you know what that is. That is obviously buying cash shop money. So you at least can work that out.
Yeah, and that's the thing, really. Like, there's more. You can compare it to like what you can get. Like, we don't know what the cash shop looks like at all for Transformers Universe. There's no indication of that yet because there hasn't been that as much communication, I'd say, from the developers. So it's really hard to say, well, this is definitely worth it, or this is something that I'm going to enjoy purchasing and get my money's worth because you don't know what the game looks like because there's so limited information in regards to the gameplay, and you haven't been able to watch too many streams perhaps and actually get a sense of it. And B, you don't even know what half of these things they're offering are optimized. Like, what's the difference between an upgraded power core, a base power core, and an optimized power core? Mm-hmm. There's no real information. There's no real reflection. And that could have been done better just by having small descriptors for each of these items on the Founders Packs. But overall, that just goes back to the Founders Pack area seems like it's a Wild West, Jason. It just kind of seems like developers and publishers are just making whatever seems like a good idea for a Founders Pack and labeling a price on it and seeing if people will pay it.
Yep, and that's what it comes down to. It's like we can talk about it here and people can gripe about it on forums and whatever, but as long as people are ponying up the cash, they're going to keep doing it. That's what matters.
It just reminds me of like the whole McDonald's situation where people are like, how dare you make such terrible, terrible food, McDonald's, as they sit there and continuously eat their Big Mac.
Basically, it's the same thing, yeah.
You got to vote with your wallet. If you have an issue with it, you can't keep buying them. You can't keep, touting them and promoting the fact that, oh man, this Founders Pack, everybody get a Founders Pack. I don't know if I'm going to buy a Founders Pack.
I mean, I know I'm going to actually call out Mr. Mike Byrne, Magic Man himself, doing the same thing a few months ago about EverQuest Next Landmark, saying the same thing. Like, God, I hate this, but I got to buy the $100 access pack. Calling you out, Magic Man, if you're listening. I remember him doing that.
I'll go tell him. I'll throw the gauntlet down, Jason.
There you go.
you and Magic Man, face off.
Come
yeah,
on.
I mean, like Jason, for example, have you ever actually bought anything through Founders Pack?
Like I said, no, I have not, and I
any early access? Have you done early access besides Minecraft?
I told you the two things I did: the Minecraft and the Guild Wars 2, and both were for games that were coming out that we're going to pay a full thing on. Now, I've thought about doing the same thing for DayZ. I wanted to. I just wanted to get a little better and look a little better based on what they have now. With H1Z1 coming out, I might look at that instead. But yeah, I mean, I've never. The few times I have acquired, shall we say, early access stuff, it's been because the company set me up with something, but it wasn't something I was probably going to get into myself.
Starbound was really the only game I can think of other than I got Minecraft because I didn't really want Minecraft, but everybody else had Minecraft.
That's exactly the same thing with me.
And I was like, I guess I should find out what this Minecraft is about. I bought into it. But in terms of actually wanting into a game, Starbound was the only game, and you know what? I played it for like a few hours and then haven't touched it again. Just like waiting for it to be finished.
Yeah, I just couldn't see myself doing it for a free-to-play game, especially.
Yeah, not with a free-to-play game. I can't justify it so much with a free-to-play game. I think that's mainly because of how free-to-play games are developed nowadays too. A lot of times they're not feature complete when they come out. So you buy into it and then you're like, well, it's missing half of what I'm really excited for.
Yeah, exactly.
I gotta wait for that to come out. I don't know. Let us know in the comments, guys, what you think of Founders Packs and if you've ever bought any. It's okay. We're not going to judge. It's fine. Why don't we go ahead and move on to the DeBombs and A-Bombs, Jason. I'm going to go ahead and give a DeBomb to WildStar, which I actually played over the weekend. I finally played a beta weekend of WildStar. They've been having them for months now, and I finally got in and played a beta weekend. And for a theme park MMO, I wasn't terribly impressed early on, but I liked the vibe. And I honestly say it kept me going at a decent pace, and I don't know, as a longtime WoW player, it sort of scratched that nostalgic WoW itch, which should make sense because it's a lot of the same developers. But yeah, I'm gonna give a tentative DeBomb right now to WildStar, and I'm gonna say that it was not as bad as I expected, and I actually enjoyed myself. So I'm looking forward to more WildStar. And yes, it's not free to play. But who knows? That could all change in the future. Jason, what's your DeBomb, A-Bomb?
I'm going to give a massive A-Bomb to games that do not include an invert Y-axis option. That is just a basic function of a game. I got into Archage, I started messing around with it, and I just couldn't invert my Y-axis. And I cannot play without that.
Is there not like some kind of add-on or some sort of small application you can download to do that for you?
I don't know. I'm not that interested in an alpha game to try and figure that out. But I mean, I looked through the menus for like 10 minutes, just trying to look at everything to see if I missed it or something, and I'm just infuriated more than anything at a game that doesn't think that's like a necessary part. I don't care if you're an early alpha or whatever. It's just required. It'd be like, well, you know, we got AS and D, but we don't have W for movement. We'll get that in later. It's just alpha.
I'm actually surprised. I didn't have that issue. I never like. I guess it's because I'm not someone who worries about y-axis as much. It's not something that I change in games. But it's so interesting to hear that you know it was so off-putting to use at the very get-go, where you put it down. I never would have thought that. I never would have even thought to look, I guess. But if it's such an important deal, then yeah, I can definitely see that being off-putting.
I had people respond on Twitter say the same thing. I found actually a forum thread online somewhere about people in some Archage forum complaining about it as well. So it's not just me. Get on it.
We gotta find you a little application, man. We gotta get you in Archage. We gotta get your impressions. You know too much about it not to be in it. Wait, how could you have known so much information and then not know it didn't have...
Because it's supposed to be something that's included in every game. It shouldn't be a question.
But you're a game reviewer. You have to seek out these things. But yes, I understand the frustrations. Well, why don't we find out what were...
I just want to say, if that was true, and if I was going to make my review of it, that would be like the first line, the 5th line, the 10th line, and the 80th line, too.
I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to make you write something, and then I'm going to hold you to that.
Archage is fun, but it doesn't have a Y for Y-axis. I enjoyed killing.
And thus, I got up from my computer and never touched it again.
The graphics were great, but it didn't have an invert Y-axis. That would be my review, basically.
Man, that's the shortest review ever.
Well, you know, I'd go on like that for another 6 pages, probably.
Oh, I thought you were just saying that you were a very concise person. No. That was going to be your review. 2 sentences. It gets my point across. Member highlights, Jason. Why don't you go ahead and take the first member highlight here? All right.
UDK says, for the DeBomb, it would have to go to Warframe for the massive amounts of updates recently, bringing a ton of new life into the game. Also for winning MMOBomb's free-to-play Ultimate Game Showdown. Yay, Warframe.
Yes, Warframe won. They do updates all the time. They actually just recently did a melee combat update where they changed how combat works in the game, so it's even more visceral and more intuitive, or I guess feedback oriented, because before you just kind of mashed a button. So that's one of the more recent updates that I noticed and took note of. But yeah, so DeBomb the Warframe, I guess it's a good example of a free-to-play MMO that keeps the train churning even past its release and doesn't just add nothing but cosmetic skins, because a lot of MMOs fall into that.
Sure.
So it's a good thing for that. Now, Shasau33, he's got a DeBomb here for Heroes of the Storm. I gave a bomb to Heroes of the Storm last week. He's given head to bomb. He's saying he's the type of person who really hates MOBAs like League of Legends or Dota, but my friend absolutely loves them for some reason. Heroes of the Storm looks like it will appeal to both of us and finally allow us to play a game together. Can't wait for release. Maybe that's the lowest denominator. That's the crossover. Jason?
Shockingly, Blizzard tries to get as many people as possible playing their games. It tries to make them accessible to a wide number of people. Could that be
Right?
successful? I don't know. That works.
It's like they did it with Hearthstone. And they're like, wait, if we did this with
WoW.
Hearthstone, we could do this with everything.
They did it with WoW. That's how they made their money.
Exactly. So yes, Shasal33, I'm glad that you found something that you can cross over with other friends with. I'll be here in Dota if you ever want to join me here. I guess. Jason, we mind taking the last one here?
All right, from Shadow Wolf. He says A-bomb to the Icelandic CCP as opposed to the other. Well, I guess there's an office in Atlanta, but whatever.
There's one in Shanghai as well.
That's true. Anyway, A-bomb to the Icelandic CCP recorded a loss of $21 million last financial year, and this, quote, studio invested more than $56 billion. Okay, I don't think that's right. He says $56 billion is probably a million. Studio invested more than $56 million into research and development. That's 4 times the amount of losses for R&D, which, again, $56 million is not 4 times 20. Anyway. Says the company has already announced it has canceled World of Darkness. So what I'm getting from Shadow Wolf is he's not happy with a lot of what CCP has been doing.
And he can't do math.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that out. He seems to like CCP, so he must play Eve. So you'd have to be kind of good at math to play Eve. But anyway,
Shadow Wolf, you got your spreadsheets mixed up, man.
Well, yeah, he's got probably like billions of ISK and can't.
Yeah, he's thinking in the ISK instead of millions. He's like 56 billion. Oh, that's the amount of ISK I have.
But yeah, I mean, again, we look at the way Dust has gone. You look at canceling World of Darkness. They still really only have Eve, which we haven't heard a whole lot. We haven't heard like they used to announce every couple of months or like once or twice a year. Hey, we've got 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 players. We haven't heard much from them for a while. So
they just announced, I believe today, that they're just doing away with expansions altogether.
Yeah, I saw that last week. They're gonna change how they do expansions. But yeah, I don't know where they're at right now. I mean, I wouldn't say they're in the greatest place right now. With, like I said, having a couple of games, one game that just completely got canceled, another one that's underperforming, and then Eve kind of steady along. They seem like they really could use a shot of adrenaline. They need something probably.
Well, they have Valkyrie, but,
sure. But
unfortunately
again,
Valkyrie isn't necessarily on the scale that they need, and it can be played without Oculus Rift, I believe. However, it is a game built for Oculus Rift. So we'll see, how much that is a niche game and how much that actually becomes something that could become part of their repertoire, or their lineup. But yeah, the whole canceling of World of Darkness, it was a lot farther along than people knew as well. There was some screenshots that were leaked as well as like an alpha manual. And there was quite a lot. There was, a good amount of stuff that you could interact with in the game for the friends and family testers. So it's kind of sad that World of Darkness got canceled because I think everybody was looking for a new Blood Rain game, essentially. But $21 million around there, whatever they actually ended up losing, it was pretty massive. And you got to remember that that's not just upfront $21 million. That's all the time and research and development that's sort of accumulated up to this point that they write off as like not worth it because they're canning the project. So it's not like just out of like they woke up one day and $21 million was missing out of their bank account. There was sort of like a assets behind that essentially. But yeah, so A-bomb to CCP, misstep there. We'll see how they can come back from that and what their new projects end up actually inevitably bringing to the table. Question of the week last week was, what was the one thing currently lacking from modern MMOs? So we asked if there was anything that you would think MMOs needed today to stand out from the crowd. And we have Ahmed here. He said that decent and creative combat system that doesn't involve quick bar numbers for close combat. So it's about time we get away from quick bars. Jason, what do you say?
I say yes and no. I think they have at least some sort of place. I mean, you don't want it to be... I would say, personally, I don't know that I just want it to be like left bar, left mouse button, shoots my gun, right mouse zooms in, and that's about it. A lot of people want to have some other way to shoot a fireball or do a teleport maneuver or something like that. So you need some other way to have additional stuff, additional crazy effects in most games. I agree that I don't like that it should be something that where you have 6 rows of hotbars like WoW does, or have 50 different power stacks. But I prefer having a smaller hotbar or suite of powers or whatever. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big thing is that unless you had some kind of like invoker style abilities where you chained keys together to make your attacker essentially, and that's how you inevitably made different sort of combos or abilities cast. You kind of need those action combat skills. You need those abilities to sort of make your character do the awesome things that you imagine your character doing, but can't necessarily force the animations. So, decent and creative combat system that breaks away from tab targeting, not tab targeting rather, but skill based or cooldown based combat. It would be nice, but you have to walk a fine line. Otherwise, you end up, like you said, with something that's too basic.
Right.
Jason, will you take the next one right here?
All right, V2099 says he wants variety and versatility, not just character-wise, but also modes. When things become a chore, it becomes a hassle, even if you release content on a regular basis. It mostly does the same thing, just a different setting and story arc. And yeah, I agree with this. This is probably my big thing. It's like, when we talk about combat, I would almost prefer to have plain, boring combat, just basic tab targeting with hotbars. As long as I'm doing something different in the game. As long as it's not just I'd rather have that and a bunch of different things to do in the game than super massive action combat and nothing but kill 10 rats quests. That's what TERA was to me.
See, that's how I felt, honestly, when I've been playing Archage. Like, I felt as though, okay, some of the quests were a little bit generic, but it was tap targeting, but you did different things. Like, I found myself scaling a mountain at one point, and that's part of the quest. Scaling a mountain and going to these different areas on the mountainside, on the the crevices and the sides of the mountain. Those kind of things break up the monotony, if you will. And it's true there that I can kind of think of DC Universe Online as a game that falls under the sort of shadow or
the do the same sort of thing. It has
every single DLC they release either adds a new power or adds like a new dungeon for people to do, a new scene. It's just kind of like another story arc, if you will, and doesn't really mix up the gameplay so much.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that. Jason Winter, does Lotro do that?
First of all, I've barely been playing. I actually just played it like last night for the first time in a couple months, but they've been doing a little better. They sort of trying to give you more stuff to do, to try and mix it up a little bit, but the leveling part is still pretty much the same.
Yeah, it really needs some innovation when it comes to adding new content. I would say that Guild Wars 2, honestly, may be an example of something that's doing something different. They add story arcs, but then they add like these big events that go with it as well.
Yeah, they've been doing a pretty good job with that. That's definitely kept me interested. Oh, they need another update. It's been a while now. They finally released in China, so maybe they can actually do some more of that now.
Perhaps. Well, we got one here from Hellcat M. He says that he would like to see...
Did you skip one?
I was going to go to that one very last.
You don't want to... Okay, all right, never mind. All right.
Yeah, Hellcat M was saying that he would like to see MMOs that have more aspects of single-player games. Like if you're a thief, for example, he says, you can actually steal things, and stealing has consequences if you're seen. Or when you kill a boss, he's dead. And that he basically goes on to say that no one else would be able to see that boss. Or if you're in the same instance, rather. So he talks about killing a boss and that boss staying dead unless you wanted to go help someone else. And when the boss, of course, would be respawn, and then you can go and help that individual kill it again, and then the boss is dead again. And we see that now a little bit through like instancing. We can see like some major characters staying dead, but I can definitely think and see it being done maybe on a larger scale, like in a whole zone. You rifle through a village, and everybody, the original inhabitants of that village are dead, for example, and then maybe new villagers come and inhabit that eventually. They have different names and they do different things.
That I could see in terms of that, but in general, yeah, I think MMOs need to go farther away from single-player games. I think they're still trying to cling too much to that kind of single-player aspect of storyline and having changes in the way that they do. Whereas it's just not appropriate for an MMO, for a game where you have multiple people around. Like he talks about, he knows other people have to kill it, and you have to go in to do the instance. But then it still breaks that immersion if I go to help somebody and I help him kill the big boss that I just killed a couple days ago.
Yeah, it's still making those sacrifices essentially.
Yeah.
It's funny, Jason. When it comes to having those single player experiences, you can kind of have those a little bit in Archage, I've seen, in terms of like going to jail and then having people vote on whether or not you get out of jail or that you stay in jail because of your deeds, you know. That's sort of that consequence thing. That's, you know, committing nefarious acts out in the wild and then being punished for that. But yeah, I can kind of think I think when he talks about, you know, stealing, all I think about is Elder Scrolls stealing, like putting a bucket on someone's head and then stealing everything around them. It's kind of hard to sort of argue about, you know, how long lasting something like that can be when you've got 20 people lined up behind you to steal from that exact same person.
Exactly. That's the thing, is how every merchant store would be just, you know, ripped clean of every bit of goods in the first, you know,
right,
hour.
And then do you argue, do you have it respawn? Is that immersion breaking, having items respawn in that? Or, you know, do people have to go and kill you for the items? Because eventually what you're going to find is that the world will be completely looted all the time, and there will be no items anywhere for anyone, because someone automatically goes over there to get it. So yeah.
It's just make that kleptomania the MMO.
Kleptomania the MMO. It's just an MMO about stealing from other people. Like, it's just perpetual stealing. You go into someone's house, you pick up a stapler, you just walk out with it. Like, I'm just taking a stapler. All right, Jason, will you take the last one here?
Oh, and you save that for me so I can pronounce it. Sure.
Exactly.
From Abschustrampe. I want to think that's German, but whatever. He says he wants more MMOs that are the same world instancing as Guild Wars 1. I loved it. There are no more popular MMOs with it.
Now, I had to make sure. I looked up. I think he's talking about the fact that it's just instance. Like, each world is instance in itself. It's not like an open world per se, which is kind of interesting. I thought it was a little more constrictive.
I wasn't a big fan of that system. I mean, you have in the towns, in the social areas, you can have basically any number of people. I mean, there's limits. There's like different districts or whatever. Then when you went to do something in an adventure area where there would be combat, you only could bring in your party of however many was for the thing, 4, 6, or 8. So.
Maybe he likes the more intimacy of it, like that you had to have parties.
Yeah, I mean, and that was certainly that was their idea. I mean, that was actually one of the first video game interviews I did was with them for Guild Wars 1 back in like 2004, and they talked about, you know, they even knew back then that, you know, we try to find a group of 5 or whatever for a dungeon, you have a hard time doing it. So they had where you could have henchmen to help you, you know, NPCs to help you along. Later on, they added heroes, so even if you were alone, you could still find a party to do that stuff. And I mean. The NPCs, they're okay, but they still just don't work as well as regular people. I think the concept of doing that was not great, but obviously it made it so that they could always have these instances that were developed for 6 people or 8 people or whatever, as opposed to having like a scaling instance like you see in a lot more games nowadays. Dungeons & Dragons Online is actually a lot like this, except that it has scaling instances instead of always meeting for the same number of people. So it was a nice concept, but I haven't seen many games implement it because I just don't know that it works all that well. Yeah,
the one thing about open world is that it allows for people to group up much more easily. You know, they see the threat, they work together on the threat instead of having to have those people ahead of time.
But obviously the problem there is you run into imbalances. Either there's something that only requires 3 people and 8 people show up to massacre it, or there's something that requires 8 people and there are only 3 people there. So you have something like Guild Wars 1 where there's always going to be the right number of people to attack something because that's what it's programmed for. So yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages to it.
For sure. So it'd be interesting to see what people have to say about that, if anyone sort of prefers instance-based MMOs. That's sort of interesting. I've never actually met anyone who preferred that as opposed to the open world, but I can definitely, now having this discussion, I can definitely see how there would be certain benefits to that based around how you like your content served to you.
Definitely look into Dungeons & Dragons Online, and also Star Trek Online does that for their stuff. All their stuff is 5-person content. You can bring your bridge crew along. So those are a couple of games that kind of feel like Guild Wars 1 in that sense.
There you have it, guys. Well, for this week's question of the week, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but our question of the week this week will be, have you ever purchased a Founders Pack? Why and what for? So we talked a little bit about what we purchased Founder Packs for. If you guys have ever purchased them, I would like to know how much you've spent on them and why you purchased them for the game you did. What made you decide that that game was something that you wanted to spend money on ahead of time before it was released? Let us know in the comments down below, or you can send us emails at michael@mmobomb.com if you want to send a little more long-winded and personal. Of course, you can even tweet us at MMOBomb. If you wanted to just send little messages and talk about that in the Game of the Week, you can do that there as well. Jason, thank you so much for coming on yet another episode here at the Free to Play Podcast. Where can people actually get a hold of you?
You can catch me on the Twitters at Winter Informal, and also I will stream again, I swear, someday at twitch.tv/JasonWinter.
Awesome. Now, for me, Spunkify, I have been mentioning my personal Twitter, but honestly, I haven't been using it too much. I have used the company one much more, MMOBomb. So if you want to talk to me, if you want to ask me MMO questions, you can do so at MMOBomb, like I mentioned before. You can also email me at michael@mmobomb.com, or just simply watch me on Twitter, twitch.tv/MMOBomb. That's every Wednesdays at 2 p.m. usually. Occasionally, I will stream also on different days. So just be on the watch out there and go ahead and check that out. Sometimes I stream games well ahead of my first looks. For example, Archage. I streamed Archage. So if you want to know more about that game, you can check that stream out. Otherwise, make sure to follow us in all our different social media areas. And until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Spunkify out. Later, guys.